My personal definition of martial arts is the art of overcoming obstacles. So when obstacles arise in our everyday life, we have that same mentality of how am I going to get around this problem? In order to do that, we have to have a positive mindset. Because in martial arts, we're training not to be a victim. And as soon as we fall into that victim mentality, then we're pretty much doomed. And so I think that resilience from the martial arts, having bad positions, just going, hey, I'm going to get better at this. I'm going to eventually succeed. It's about prevailing in a bad situation.
Welcome to the Ageless Warrior Lab. I'm BJJ Black Belt and Dirty Dozen member Dave Meyer, here to draw wisdom from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the martial arts and explore how it applies to success in business, relationships, your long-term health, and making the most out of your life. What you're about to hear is a conversation I had with Burton Richardson. Burton has a lifetime of martial arts training and teaching spanning the globe, and he is in the Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame. He started training in 1980 and is an instructor under Dan Inosanto in Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, Jun Fan Gung Fu, and Filipino Kali. He's an instructor in Muay Thai and Pencak Silat and is one of only a handful of Americans to ever travel to South Africa to study the art of Nguni stick fighting with the Zulu tribe, making several training trips. He was also an original member of the Dog Brothers full contact stick fighting team down in Southern California. He was a regular writer for and featured on the cover of a number of martial arts magazines over many years. He has authored 6 books, and he's been involved in choreographing fight scenes and even appearing himself in several movies. Burton is passionate about pressure testing martial arts techniques for practical application and produced the videos BJJ for the Street and Clinch for the Street, both available on BJJ Fanatics. He has coached numerous successful MMA fighters, including Egan Enson Inoue, and Chris Leben. He cornered Barrett Yoshida in 4 ADCCs and numerous other competitions. Burton has lived and taught in Hawaii since 1998, where he now trains with Marcelo Garcia and Egan Inoue. One of Burton's main thrusts is the importance of training fighting as a competitive sport with safety rules, but against opponents who are fully resisting so we can pressure test our techniques. But also then finding safe ways to sometimes set those rules aside and remember what reality might be like. Multiple opponents and the possibility of a weapon being used and things like that. As you're going to see, Burton is a wonderful guy and what I call in the martial arts a lifer. So sit back and enjoy my conversation with Sifu Professor Burton Richardson. So Burton, thank you so much for taking the time to join me for this discussion.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I'm going to say for people that don't know just how amazing David Meyer is, I'm going to tell you from way back. I know he doesn't know I was going to say this. From way, way back, I'd go train at the Machados with Egan and all, and they would be there, and he was just wrecking people in the nicest way. Jiu-Jitsu, what we do is we submit our partner to make them better and make ourselves better at the same time. It's a great thing. But I'm telling you, I mean, and then all the competition, then he started competing and winning and winning and winning and winning. And of course, we know it's not absolutely all about winning, but sure, it sure is nice when you're winning all the time. Really just a phenomenal exponent of not just jiu-jitsu, but the martial arts here. So I want to just make sure that's clear.
Well, thank you very much for that. And that was very nice. Yeah, those were the days. I still can bring it a bit. I think we're probably similar ages. I'm 63 now.
Yeah, I'm 64.
Okay. But yes, definitely considered myself to be an enforcer. It was great. And you've been doing this for so long. You have such an amazing breadth of martial arts experience. We've never really had a chance to sit and talk, or I don't even think train together. We'll do that. I'll make that happen in Hawaii. But you're just so well respected. I would love to hear just a little bit of history of how you got into martial arts, your martial arts journey, and then we can talk about our areas of mutual interest.
So grew up, I already had an affinity for martial arts. One of the early photos of me is I'm at Catalina Island where my parents were raised and grandparents lived. And I'm probably 5 years old and I have a plastic samurai sword. So already somehow it was in me. Then when I was about 9 years old, I had a very bad incident happen where I was walking home from baseball practice and ended up coming across a predator, an
Mm.
adult sexual predator that got me into an enclosed place and all. It was horrible. And just, there's a lot of constant, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. Right. So since then, just this idea, I do not ever want to be in a position of that kind of helplessness at the hands of such evil, terrible, whatever you want to call it. And then as I got older and I was training, I realized, hey, I can help other people. So hopefully they will never be in that same position where they feel totally helpless in front of someone who's trying to do them
Yeah.
great harm. So that basically is the impetus for my training. Thankfully, I love it. I just love it. And so luckily started with Dan Inosanto, who was Bruce Lee's training partner and protege. And so from there, the whole idea of research and development, basically, that's what Dan Inosanto would call it, is research and development. What can we do to make this better? And that's what Bruce Lee was all about, is constantly improving, but then pressure testing everything to make sure it works against not just a couple people, but a wide variety of people that are coming at you with different tactics. So that's what I continue to this day. And that took me to all over the world training, from, I guess, the most exotic place. I made several trips to South Africa to learn Zulu stick fighting from the Zulus out in the Zulu villages in the hills of South Africa, and which
Cool.
is fascinating and actually doesn't seem like it would be, very pertinent to modern day self-defense because of the use of a shield instead of just going empty hands, or if you have a weapon, pick up something to use as a shield, because it just makes a huge difference in your ability to deal with someone who's either striking or coming at you with a weapon. So yeah, just constant research and development.
That is super cool. And you mentioned Dan Inosanto, who, of course, I know well, and he also trained with the Machado brothers and got his black belt. The Inosanto Academy, which is where I assume you trained, it was and is a very well-known place in Los Angeles. And Dan, at least at that time, I think it's still this way, would bring in great instructors in many different styles. So you could learn French savate, you could learn Pencak Silat, you could learn, I don't know, what else you teach you? Well, Jeet Kune Do, of course,
Filipino martial arts,
ultimately Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm
Thai
sure he had
boxing. Yeah.
Kali, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for you on that. I, of course, never met Bruce Lee, and I've never trained in Jeet Kune Do, although I have a lot of respect for it. But my understanding was that it's all about synthesizing and basically learn things and distill it and take what's useful. What Dan was doing, which was very interesting, was he was providing a menu of things to do. So he wasn't just teaching what he synthesized and saying, this is the best I can give you. He was basically letting you draw from all these different things and synthesize, which is an interesting way to teach. I think most instructors are either teaching one style and that's their style, or doing what I did at the time when I was teaching, which was just teach what I thought was the most current, best assimilated style. I'm wondering your take on that. When you were with Dan, were you just training with him in Jeet Kune Do, or were you training in all, like you mentioned, you've been to South Africa, you've got these different styles. And what's your take on going to the source and then doing your personal assimilation, as opposed to learning it all and then just becoming a teacher of what is pre-assimilated?
See, that is such an insightful question. So this is my point of view on it, is that one, Dan Inosanto was bringing in lots of different people. So many people sought him out because he's, first of all, as you know personally, he's
Yeah.
such a good person to be around. If you just go in for mentorship on how to live your life, that alone, without the martial arts, you're going to be so much better off training with Dan Inosanto. As far as martial arts, though, not everybody wants to do weaponry, right? Not everybody wants to do silat or do kickboxing or this and that. They don't want to do a sport of Thai boxing. So I think brilliantly, Guru Dan, as we call him, provided that. So, like, hey, it's about you. It's not about me. It's about what you are going to do. Let me provide you with all this information. Then you do the assimilation yourself, which is the end result or goal of Jeet Kune Do, is find what works for you. And so if he just taught his style, then you'd be copying his style. Then you'd have to go someplace else to get some more input and try to see what's going to work best for you. Or he's like, here, I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to show you things I don't use and don't particularly like. Maybe they don't fit me because of my size or my attributes, but they may fit you. And so here you go. And which I think is interesting as Brazilian Jiu Jitsu instructors, we can easily fall into, hey, this works really well for me. But sometimes we have to teach things and be very familiar with things as a teacher that we don't use ourselves too much, but we know is effective. So maybe that's the thing that just resonates with our student. So I think Dan Inosanto does that at a very high level because talk about research and development, that's all he does. To this day, he's constantly studying with other people and he's about to turn 90. And then he takes what he's learning and he generously provides it to all the students. Now, you asked about if I just did the JKD or this and that. So I've been what people would call successful. This is just being factual. I got pretty good at this stuff and
Yeah.
partially because I love it and all, right? There's always more to learn. I'm constantly training and trying to improve myself. But when I was looking back some years back and said, why was it that I tended to progress maybe faster than some of my fellow students? And I'm not saying I'm just better than them or whatever, but I was progressing faster and all that. And was such a simple thing is that Dan Inosanto taught classes at the IMB Academy in Torrance. He taught a morning class 2 times a week, and he taught evening classes twice a week. Then he taught evening classes at his own academy in Marina del Rey twice a week. And after the morning classes in Torrance, he would go to Harbor College and he would teach 2 self-defense classes twice a week. So that was 18 classes a week. I was at every single class he taught for years. And that's all it was. I mean, basically, that's all you had to do is just show up to as many classes as you possibly could. I was living in abject poverty. So I made just enough money to get food and fuel and pay for classes. Literally, I didn't have health insurance. I lived in a little tiny camper trailer in a parking lot of a dog and cat hospital near downtown LA for 5 years. But all I did was train. And so I trained in every single class. And then what I did was at home, like at night in the parking lot when everybody's gone, I would train in the parking lot. So the point being, it was very helpful to me to just train in everything. And then later I could find what works for me through the sparring process and sparring with different people. And I find what my proclivities are and such, but I'm always willing to change. I think that's just an important thing. Just show up.
Yeah, put in the hours. You put in the hours. That's amazing dedication that you were there. And part of that is just your lifestyle. At different times in our lives, we have other responsibilities. We can't train as much. I think when we're younger, that is the time when maybe we don't have a family yet, or we just don't have as many responsibilities. So we can put in those hours. I had my whole life in jiu-jitsu since I was a little kid. So I've always had that growing up, and that's always been a major thing. But even when I started in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I remember I started by training twice a week because that was all my body could take because I was using so much strength. I was thinking like, wow, I'm going to become so buff and I'm so tired. And I can only imagine how silly that sounded to my coaches when I would say that, because clearly I just wasn't using enough technique. But in any case, I eventually got up to 4 times a week, which was about the best I could swing at that time because I already was in my 30s and I did have stuff. And I've often thought, wow, if I could have trained more than that, I might have even gotten better. But we encounter things when we encounter them, and we get as good as we get.
Nowadays, like lifting weights. You can't go lift weights every day, which I did at one time in college. And I was kind of commiserating or just complaining to a coach, like, I can't get any stronger. Actually, I feel like I'm getting a little weaker in the weight room. And he says, well, how many days a week are you training? I said, oh, every day. I would bench press my maximum every single day. I was just breaking my body down. And I think
Yeah.
looking at jujitsu, I think those breaks actually help us assimilate. Wouldn't you
Absolutely.
agree?
Well, you're not lifting weights every minute. You are getting rest. So let's just say you're in the gym for an hour. So then you have 23 hours in which you're not in the gym. God did not say that's the amount of time you need or don't need. It's just 23 hours, right? That is generally not enough recovery time for most people, especially if you're going to max. So I could totally understand if you're only getting 23 hours of recovery time, your muscles are just staying broken down. You don't have the chance. And it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. If you're really getting yourself all tired and working out your joints and you're not giving yourself enough recovery time, your body can't recover. But as I think you're saying, also just mentally, it takes time to process and assimilate and draw things in. So sometimes less is more in the martial arts.
Have you had the experience of an injury or traveling something?
Yeah.
You go away, you come back, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be terrible. Everything you do feels better and is working better.
100%. Yes, I've noticed that if I get sick and I'm out for, I don't get sick that much, but if I'm out for a week or something and I think, oh man, I'm going to be in such terrible shape when I get back. And then you may have lost a little bit, but your neck feels better and your shoulders feel better and you're clear and you've had a chance to think, no, that's very true. I think there is such a thing as overtraining for sure. So, what you said about Guru Dan makes really good sense that if he, as a relatively smaller person, had assimilated what works best for him, that would be putting a filter on what students could be able to get. And like you say, maybe they want to go deeper into stick, or maybe they don't want to touch a weapon and they just want to develop their kicks or something. So that totally makes sense. Sort of created, I would call it maybe a university environment.
Yeah. I mean, he called it Inosanto Academy for a reason. It was an
That's why they call it. Yeah.
academy where you could go and learn various subjects depending on what you wanted to major in, basically.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. It sounds to me like you're still training, you're still experimenting, but I'm guessing, and perhaps I'm wrong, that you've settled on certain things that you're really focusing on these days. Is that true?
I continue to focus, basically for me, it's standing, clinch and ground, and scenario, and then weaponry, not just weapons against weapons, but empty hand against weapons. So very much like you were talking about in your street fight
Right. In the
self-defense.
episode I just released just before we were recording this. Yeah.
Exactly. All that breadth. So I'm trying to practice that all the time. So if I can
Okay.
mention that when we look at self-defense, there are a lot of people that talk about like, oh, MMA is good enough for self-defense. If you just do MMA, you got the punching, the kicking, the takedowns, everything, you're good. But a lot of people in the quote self-defense specific arts say, well, no, because there are rules, there are weapons involved, and this and that. But what we have to realize, at least in my point of view and my experience, is the sport practitioner trains to actually be able to perform the sport against someone who's totally resisting, like 100%. And so that training method is the secret sauce to actually bring out your skills and your timing and your sense of distance when standing and such. But the self-defense people have a point as well. So basically what I did is just, hey, let's take MMA sort of as a template, but add simulated eye strikes. Let's add very light groin attacks. Let's pull a weapon at any time, etc. MMA is basically kickboxing range, clinch range, and ground, bottom and top. But we need for self-defense, which you mentioned in your episode, which is amazing, is the scenario. If you don't work on scenarios, that's how the fight starts often. And there's ambush, there are, of course, multiple opponents and such. But we work on a lot of different scenarios and how to talk somebody down to avoid the situation just for legal purposes so that
Yep.
you don't end up in legal trouble, because somebody might come up to you, be aggressive, they start taking a swing, you get in there and you just fire them on the cement, you throw them on their head or something, or on their shoulder. Well, somebody pulls out their phone, starts videotape, getting video right when you're the one throwing, it looks like you're the aggressor.
Right.
Right. So anyway, there's the whole legal, not to
Yep.
mention the ethical part. So basically, kickboxing, clinch, ground scenario with weaponry involved.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to talking about street stuff. And you're referencing an episode that I just did that'll have been out for like a couple of weeks by the time this one comes out. And it was kind of long because I had a lot to say on it. But one of the things I did not talk about was legal liability, because you're right. That's a whole nother thing to pay attention to. I think I made maybe one quick mention to making it clear that you're saying I'm scared, but that is a very real issue. And it's a particularly real issue if you happen to be a trained martial artist, because then you can have someone suing you saying, hey, this guy's been training his life in the martial arts. He didn't have to hurt that person. That sort of a thing. I mean, we live in a very litigious society besides just the criminal aspects of it. But before we get on to street stuff, because I'm very interested in talking to you about that and getting your impressions on that, because I know that this is something that you've been thinking about basically your entire life since that terrible incident that happened to you. And by the way, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And kudos to you for turning that into something that is probably a positive in your life.
Absolutely. If I could go back, I wouldn't have that happen. But
No.
since it happened, use it, right? It's actually been helpful, not just for me, for lots of students worldwide that I've been able to help, and actually developing my knife defense program, which is very difficult to do, everybody. Of course, knife defense is really difficult, but by pressure testing that a lot, it's actually up to 10 incidents where people that I've trained or someone I trained them, and they went against a knife and thankfully got out of there in one piece. So it's actually ended up helping other people as well.
So we have to get together because I used to work on knife defense stuff. I'd love to learn from you, tell you the stuff that I used to do and get your impression on it. We'll certainly do that. I'll make it out
Great.
to Hawaii. But yeah, I call that alchemy of outcomes. Actually, one of my
Mm.
first podcast episodes on this was about that, how there are things in life that are objectively good or objectively bad. Being a kid accosted by a horrible predator, objectively bad, no question. But ultimately, it is how we adapt to these things and what we do with them. We write the next chapter of the story. And so you've written a good chapter of the story. But real quickly, in your training, the martial arts university aspect, did you spend time in any particular art that you, in retrospect, feel like you probably could have spent less time in, that wasn't too valuable? Or is there anything that you wish you would have spent more time in? But it sounds like if there is, you can be spending time in it right now because you're still doing martial arts. But just in terms of your development, do you wish you'd spent a little bit less time on this, more time on that?
Yeah, what a good question. There's, gosh, over time, I would say long-term perspective, I'm glad I did everything. There are certain things I spent quite a bit of time at that probably aren't the most practical, but then it gave me an ability to take these things and test them and go, oh, it's not practical, and which made me understand better to be more discerning as far as street self-defense. Now, as I got older, certain things become more important. For example, something I do is like since I was a kid growing up in Carson, California, when I was growing up, more Samoans in the city of Carson than in the capital of Samoa.
Huh.
So I grew up with a lot of Samoans, Filipinos, some people of Japanese descent, of course, Latinos and African Americans, just this great melting pot. But we did cultural dance in school. We learned some Filipino dance, some Samoan dance, and all. And I like the dance. Now, maybe I spent a lot of time on that dance aspect in my martial arts also. And then later you go, well, how useful is that? And so this is where, as we get older, maybe we have a better perspective when we can look at something. You alluded to that statement in Jeet Kune Do: absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own. Over time, I think it's better to go absorb what is useful, put what is useless, quote useless, to the side, because maybe later you'll go, hey, well, actually, now I know how to use that, right?
Yep.
So you're not being
Yep.
so arrogant as just jettison something. Like Silat dance. Now I really enjoy doing the dance just for my body. And I went through many, many years of illness. It started in college. For years, they didn't know what it was. Then they finally told, oh, it's ulcerative colitis. That's what you have. Really
Mm,
terrible. And then I dealt with that for decades and then ended up having to have my entire large intestine removed, plus
mm,
part of the small intestine and all this, especially after that first big surgery, literally years of being very weak, being in pain all the time and this and that. But the Silat dance helped me so much because I could do that. Like after surgery, that was one of the first things I could actually do movement wise. And so if I didn't have that, it turned out, oh, this is very helpful to me. Good for my mind, good for my body to breathe and all. You know, you never know where it's going to come up. I would just mention too that that famous saying, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own. Actually, there's a first one. That's actually two, three, four. Number one is research your own experience. And by
mm.
experience, I would say experience means not just training in something, but actually trying to apply it like we do in Jiu-Jitsu, right? We don't just learn the techniques. We learn the techniques, then we try to apply it to someone who's trying to submit us. And that is how we understand the technique better. We get the timing and the reading. So, very important. If you're doing self defense as a primary, you should be doing your self defense oriented sparring primarily. I think, would be a very simple rule of thumb. If my primary interest is self defense, then my primary training should be self defense oriented, and my sparring should be self defense oriented primarily. Problem is getting other people who want to do it with you. But you alluded to in your previous episode also, when we're doing jujitsu, we can actually, and I got this from Guru Dan because he would do it, if somebody would take him down, and he started jujitsu when he was 60. When someone would take him down, he would put his hands up on their face. I could put his hand like this and push the head away, but he's simulating an eye gouge.
Right.
They don't know it, but he's actually having that as a primary thought right there.
I actually still do that as well. This is so interesting. First, a couple things to just clarify for our listeners, our watchers, what you're talking about. People ask that question, what do you believe now that you didn't used to believe before? Or what have you changed your opinion on? For my martial arts growing up, which was mostly jiu-jitsu based, not Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but other styles of jiu-jitsu, very practical jiu-jitsu, tough fighters, we would fight, put on gloves, whatever. But I always had this ethos of sport isn't good because sport has all these rules and you're taking out the most dangerous, lethal things for the sport, but you want to be training in the most dangerous, lethal things because you want them to be there for you if when you really need them. And so I didn't do judo competitively. I didn't do kickboxing competitively. There was some resistance in some of what I did, but that was my feeling. Then when I encountered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was so dominated by Egan the first time, or by John Will, who taught me my first lesson, who, if you don't know him, I should introduce you. You would love him and he would love you. That I realized, it's nice that I can, I don't know, neck breaks and eye gouge, just all these kinds of things. But I can't do them at the moment because I'm completely under control. And B, to the extent that I could do them, this other guy could do them even better because he's in total control of me. So he can eye gouge too. Hello. And so I realized, oh, I get it. That the peeling away of the most dangerous things that allow you to practice a sport competitively against, as you're saying, active resistance, non-compliance, is what allows you to get good at what remains. And there's plenty of great fight stuff that remains, chokes, arm bars, leg attacks, I mean, whatever. That's all very effective stuff. And what I hear you saying, though, is you don't have to completely abandon one or the other. And that's kind of where I am in my life now, too. Like, great. So now I've gotten very good at control, very good at arm bars, very good at safe things. But it doesn't mean you have to forget. I could absolutely right now, I could like drop my elbow like right onto your eye. I'm in the perfect position to do it. And to even train that lightly with friends sometimes just to remind you, like you said, what Dan does. I do that all the time in my training in jiu-jitsu. I will constantly prod at people, like I will play with them. I'll put a hand somewhere and they'll try to make a grab at my hand and I will take control of their hand. And I'm not doing it for jiu-jitsu. I'm doing it to remind myself, even though we're not actually striking at that moment, that I can control your hands. I can trap your hands. I can determine what you're going to grab and what you're not going to grab. And if we flicked a switch right now and said, let's start punching each other in the face, I'm going to have the upper hand because I'm thinking about that all the time, even in my training of jiu-jitsu. So yeah, I hear what you're saying and that really resonates with me.
I will make a distinction there. You're
Please.
not just thinking about it, you're actually practicing it.
Well, yes,
Because
exactly. I'm doing it, but I'm falling short of it. Yes, I'm not sitting at home thinking about it. Right.
yes, there's a thought that I've heard many, many times. I have a good friend who his whole thing is, hey, I know MMA, I train MMA. If I was in a street fight, I would just switch to the street fight rules and add eye poke or something like that. But we train ourselves so that we don't think that our body responds without thought. And so my point of view is if you're out on the street and all, what is going to prompt you really if an altercation happens? What's going to prompt you to go, oh, wait, I'm not going to just stay within the MMA rules. You know, it's because you probably just got kicked in the groin or you already got eye gouged or the guy has a knife and he's already stabbing at you. That is way too late. So I applaud you for actually not just thinking about, but you're actually doing it in training so that you
Yeah, I'm
are
trying.
trained, your subconscious is trained to respond like that.
You know, Burton, I hesitate to talk about it. And I just alluded to it in that episode that you said, and I didn't want to give a demonstration of it. But my early jujitsu instructor, my first jujitsu instructor, Jack Secchi, was very reality focused. We were not doing sport, but very reality focused. And one of the things, when you have somebody on the ground, it is not a hard thing to do to just smack their head down while you're grappling into the concrete if you're above them. It's a terrible thing. You can crack their skull. We're not trying to kill anybody, but if there's multiple opponents or whatever, if you have to shut this person down, one, I believe, I've never done this to anybody, but I believe that one good way to do it was I can get into a position where I am going to make you hit your head on the ground very hard. And it's the easiest thing to do. And I do not think it would occur to someone who has only been doing sport grappling or sport MMA to even think that this thing I've trained 100 times this way, like maybe double a takedown and putting someone on their back, that you're going to instantly modify your technique and drop them on their head if you actually haven't, to some extent, practiced that, like on a crash pad or something like that.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think you get good at what you practice.
Yes. And that's what comes up automatically also. I
Yes.
mean, automatically, for example, I'm sure we both know people who train jujitsu extensively and or grappling arts. Something happens in the street, police officers, this happens, and they change levels and they shoot, and that's their response. And there's a video that happened recently where a police officer did that. He didn't realize the guy coming out of the house had a knife in his hand.
Mhm.
And so the guy was, as he had the body lock on him, the guy's just stabbing him in the back over and over again because he didn't think of what's most dangerous first. So if you don't
Right.
mind, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. If we are doing jujitsu, or let's say MMA, let's go MMA, right? You have somebody in your guard, you're doing MMA, right? What is your first thing you're going to deal with to prevent? You're probably going to prevent the punches and elbows. You're going to get to a position where you bring them close or you keep them away where they can't reach you. If the headbutt's involved, you're going to make sure your hands either in front of the face or the head is controlled so they can't headbutt you. So we deal with the most dangerous things first. Someone's mounted on top of you in jiu-jitsu without strikes, you're going to keep your elbows in. You're not going to push off and give them an arm bar. We deal with the most dangerous things first. Street self-defense, the most dangerous thing is a weapon being produced. Often people say, oh yeah, I would expect a weapon, but you have to train to expect a weapon. That's my point of view. And you have to train yourself to expect the weapon all the time. And how do you do that? To me, the simplest way, and this is what I do in my BJJ for the street classes, MMA for the street classes, is everybody keeps either a training knife, a training pistol, or both, preferably both, on them at all times. And I have a guy making us these smaller ones that are kind of grippy, so they stick. You
Yep.
put your gi on or no gi, and it stays in there. And you just go about your training, but at any time,
You
your
can pull it
partner
out.
can pull out. So you're not just thinking like, oh yeah, maybe. You are constantly, one, monitoring it, and number two, when you go hands on, you're putting yourself in a position that makes it difficult for them to draw.
Mhm.
Rather than go, okay, I'm going to get a neck clinch and I'm going to be throwing knees. Oh, they have a knife. Oh, let me let go. Way too late. So we
Right.
prioritize double bicep tie, for example, because that way I can be in there, I can control, works well against somebody a lot bigger and stronger than you also, but we can control in there and have control of the arm. So I don't have to just have visual on their hands. I need tactile. So it's little simple things like that. But that's how you go from thinking about it to actually training yourself to expect the weapon at all times.
I think that's brilliant. I've played with that a little bit back in the days when I was teaching jujitsu, or as an instructor, I might just hand someone in the middle of grappling a rubber knife that they could start using. But I think what you're talking about is taking that even to another level, having it present. And it's certainly possible to do, especially with training weapons. And again, it's not like a real knife, it's just making people aware. I don't think it's making the training any more dangerous. I
Yes.
think that's really, really brilliant. I read up on some of your stuff just a little bit before we talked, and I noticed that there was a time in which you were teaching JKD seminars and you stopped doing that. Is that correct? And what was the reason for that? What was your thinking there?
It wasn't really JKD seminars. I was teaching everything under the sun. And then what happened is I was not doing any discernment as far as does this work? Does it not work? Later, I realized it's not so much does it work or does it not work? It's when does it work? And more importantly yet, when is it the number one go to? Even if it's something that looks like that's a very low priority or probably doesn't work very well, there are certain positions you might be in that this move that doesn't work in a lot of other positions or common positions works very well in a bad position. Right? For example, I'm going to move back just a little bit. There's
Okay.
a where you go 1, 2, 3 against a punch. Somebody throws a punch at you, you go 1, 2, and then you punch them. Well, if somebody throws a punch and you go one, the other punch is coming. By the time you get to two, that second punch is probably there. So this is 1, 2. If you actually try it in boxing, you're going to realize that move this forward just a touch.
It's a little impractical.
That is tough to do, right? Okay,
Mhm.
so throw that out. But if I'm here and the punch is coming from over there, I can't do my parries and all this. Now this is actually 1, 2, and coming in is probably the most efficient thing to do. So we need to understand certain things that look inefficient. We need to know when they work, and there may be a time when it is the best thing to do. But on those seminars, I was teaching everything, no discernment. And then this was the early 90s. And then what happened is I started training with Egan Inoue, Ensign
I
Inoue.
know Egan very well.
Yes, you do. I remember going to the academy or to
Yeah.
Higgins with Egan. There's a whole story. Egan had you get on your back and was teaching Egan this over underpass. And so he's like, okay, you do the triangle. And you kept getting into the triangle and all. But the point being, Egan was the first non-Brazilian world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He won blue belt in Brazil. And the following year, he won purple belt absolute. So anyway, this guy is
Yeah,
running these.
just let me clarify for our listeners. So there is Higan Machado, Rigan, and Higan is our coach, Brazilian, and Egan Inoue
EGAN.
and his brother Ensign, great fighters out of Hawaii who were MMA fighters, and Egan came to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Higan at our place in Los Angeles. And that's where I met Egan. And I remember great training sessions with him. And I remember him being very switched on to footlocks and foot attacks when there weren't a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people doing that. And Egan is a great guy, a total physical specimen. Please go on with your story.
Thank you for clarifying all that. So
Yeah.
I started training with Egan. I was doing a camp here in Hawaii. I was still living in LA. He came to the camp. Egan Machado was supposed to teach and the last minute couldn't make it. And so Egan ended up showing some things. I'm like, wow, this guy's really good. This was before he won any championships or anything. We became friends. I'd come over. I would train him in kickboxing. He would train me in grappling. And so we're doing MMA. And of course, Ensign, his brother, who became a super famous champion in MMA. And what I realized, like most of the stuff I was doing just wasn't working against them. That structure, the wrestling structure, the jiu-jitsu structure, the whole thing, it just wasn't working. And so I had an epiphany, like, you know what? I'm only going to teach things that I have done in hard sparring, other people have done in hard sparring, maybe to me, or that we see happening in fighting. So that was going back to my science roots. I went to USC and was a biologist, and I just went to the scientific method. Let's actually have a hypothesis, which is a technique. Let's test it with a valid test, and then look at the data and not be partial. Just say, what does the data say? Oh, this is working, that's not working. So I actually contacted all the seminar hosts. I was doing well over 40 seminars per year. I'm going out on the weekend after weekend after weekend. And I just told them, you know what? I'm not going to teach all those things that I've been teaching, all the art portion. I'm just going to teach this practical, and we're going to narrow it down. And as I suspected, my seminars went from over 40 to maybe 6 per year. But I'm glad I did. I'm so glad I made that change. But then over time, right, everything's expanded. How much has jiu-jitsu changed? There's so many more. Look at MMA. Actually, a lot of coaches, top UFC coaches, have a JKD background, and they started adding in things from Bruce Lee's training back in the early 70s and has changed MMA as well. So there's a lot of expansion there. But yeah, that's basically my point. Let's do things that are proven, and let's do sparring in a way that everybody can spar safely. Everybody can spar safely, lower the intensity, and they can experience for themselves. Not just take our word for it, but they actually get the experience themselves so they can apply it themselves.
Kudos to you for having the courage and the commitment to make that change, even though it was financially probably not a good move. The easiest thing to do is to just keep doing what you've been doing. I think a lot of martial arts instructors do that, and that's okay if they want to do that. It is hard to say, hey, I'm going to set something aside and do something new. I went through that when I first encountered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was never teaching professionally, but I had a class I was teaching at a fencing center, effectively a community center, that I closed and said, sorry, guys, I'm putting on a white belt and I got to start over, similar to feelings that you had like with Egan and Ensign. And you also mentioned that your stuff wasn't working on them. Most anything can work on somebody, but we want things that work on most people, right? Obviously, there's going to be a better fighter. And I think one of the traps that martial arts instructors fall into is if they're not pressure testing their technique, whether it be a stylized form of jiu-jitsu or whatever the martial art is, they are constantly doing it with their own students who, of course, idolize them. And they're not really resisting. And so those instructors can really start to drink their own medicine and just keep believing that what they're doing is good. But if you don't get outside of your bubble and try it on other people, this thing that maybe works all the time on your students, you might find doesn't work on people who aren't submissive and just worship the ground you walk on.
That is the fact. Again, back to science. In science, if someone comes up with a theory and tests it and says, hey, look, I've made a discovery, people in that field, they try to replicate those results. And if they find they can't, they say, there's a flaw in your experiment. And the flaw in martial arts is the lack of resistance, usually. Compliant partners, or like you say, someone who's just doesn't want to make you look bad. Interesting in martial arts, even MMA guys, like you get these rough, tough guys, and somebody comes in and says, I'll just give you an example. Chris Leben, who was a great UFC fighter, super tough and just great guy, really heart of gold. Somebody came into his academy here in Hawaii one time when he lived here, his gym, and said, like, I do this particular martial art and we don't do this sport. We're all about actual fighting. MMA is no good. I just take you out. And Chris, instead of going, would you like to put the gloves on? Would you like to give it a try right now? He's just like, oh, wow, oh gosh, that's amazing. And so it's a thing where even within martial arts, we're just like, okay, just let them be. It's not up to me to go and open this person's mind.
Right.
Which actually in the end can do a little disservice to people, but
it's a balance of when to call someone out. Kudos to him for having that kind of restraint, because I probably would have said, oh, really? Why don't you show me? But you certainly don't want to do that in front of people. You mentioned assimilating other things. I'm going to mention my friend in Australia, John Will, a lifetime martial artist, very much a Don Draeger type, and I know who I'm talking about.
oh yes.
And then traveled Southeast Asia, and Ceylon actually won a world championship there. I remember when he was studying a bit of fencing because of the footwork. So it's like what you were saying before about there may be aspects of an art that maybe the whole thing isn't what you want, but there is something there that is useful, or maybe something that'll be useful in the future. And what he was interested in was who covers ground forward very fast. And fencers are very good at that. It's a matter of shuffling forward and drawing the rear leg forward so you can then use it to launch forward. And he incorporated that into sort of his, what I'll call a blitz style of punching and kicking, where he is just coming at you and
Nice.
nothing is going to stop him. And that's what you're making me think of when you're talking about looking at different styles, like you say, testing things, pressure testing things, and seeing how they work for you, which also maybe also just pressure testing them for your body. We all have different bodies.
True. Well, interesting you mentioned fencing, because Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, toward the end of his life, the three base arts were Wing Chun, boxing, and fencing.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, because he took the tactics and some of the footwork, but a lot of the tactics also attributes from fencing. His brother, Bruce Lee's brother, was a fencing champion in Hong Kong. And so basically what happened is one day his brother said, because Bruce Lee's doing all the empty hand thing, how about we have a little slap fight, but we can only use one hand? And Bruce said, okay, let's go. And he just used fencing and slapped Bruce Lee all over the place. It's such a good example, like who incorporates fencing into their empty hand martial art? Well, John Will, Bruce Lee. I mean, that's
right.
A good company right there.
Through high school, I did a period of quite a few years where I was doing Sil Lum Kung Fu, which was 5 animals of Kung Fu with Doug Wong in the San Fernando Valley.
Oh, yeah.
Doug and Kerry Ogawa, and they were great. And it was basically forms. I would call it dance. But there are a few things that I take from that. One of them I mentioned in that podcast episode, the lift kick.
Yes.
I really love a good lift kick to the groin. Man, if
you just practice that.
Yes.
You know, if that is like, I'm going to practice one thing and you have that tool sharp, you now have just put yourself in such a position to dominate, at least get that first shot off on somebody who's not expecting it. And you're so far ahead of the game. In Jeet Kune Do, the groin kick, there's a stop kick to stop somebody who's advancing on you, but then groin kick is the primary. And when we do our sparring, the groin kick is the primary kick. We just make sure we wear groin protection,
right?
And we go to just barely touch. But then again, we are constantly protecting against the groin kick instead of going into a Muay Thai stance, getting kicked in the groin and going, oh, I better change my stance.
Yeah, or I'm not wearing a cup.
Yes,
yes, exactly. But the reason I mentioned the Kung Fu is there was something else I took from that too. We would do what we called soft hands, which was basically a Wing Chun thing, a game of who can hit each other's face without excessive strength, right? But who can misdirect hands and cross up?
Yeah.
And it was, soft hands or sticky hands.
Yes.
And I do that in jujitsu all the
All
time.
the
That is
time.
how I keep people from grabbing my collar. I do it all the
Yeah.
time. So I wouldn't look back at those years I did Kung Fu and say, was that wasted time? I loved the stances. I got really strong thighs and stuff
And
at that time. But there were things I drew from that I carry from. So I think it's great that you're talking about going to South Africa. It's like tasting, right? Going and tasting different cuisines, and the whole cuisine may not be something that you're going to make the thing you eat every night, but there's a spice in that. Or there, I'm
mhm.
just using this analogy, or there's a particular dish like that would go well with me. And you take from that, and then that really enhances what you're doing.
I agree. Decades ago, I used to write for Inside Kung Fu magazine. I did a monthly column and I wrote a column on like going to a buffet and the martial arts buffet, right? And so you
Maybe
go
that's
and
maybe that's where I got that analogy from, because I used to read your
I think
column.
that's you probably came up with that on your own, but I think it's accurate, right? Depending on what you want, which is why, again, Dan Inosanto provides the buffet. Here you
Mhm.
go, right? Now have what you like. Take it in the direction. For example, I went in the direction of just pressure testing everything and looking for that pressure tested data against different types of fighters and this and that. And Dan Inosanto is very happy with that, constantly encouraging me on my path. Just as he might have somebody who wants to, for example, sticking hands, they just want to specialize in sticking hands, and that's what they love. And he's going to encourage them to go on that path, which is beautiful, right?
Mhm.
Because we're all individuals and we have different reasons for doing martial arts. I would might mention too, doing those forums with Douglas Wong and Kerry Ogawa, that maybe when you're 90, you're like, hey, I want a different sort of leg conditioning. Maybe you're going to go back and start doing those forms again. It might be something really useful and fun for you and
Yeah.
interesting. So it may end up having great use for you in the future.
That's a really good point. I have noticed myself sometimes, especially if I'm traveling and just want to get my body moving and don't have any access to any particular equipment, maybe just running through. I don't even remember the form. It doesn't matter. It's more the
Yeah.
movements. That's a very good point. I just want to circle back to the street and reality for a minute, because we've talked around that. And in my view, you are kind of the world's authority on that. You mentioned a very interesting style of training, grappling, which is to have a training weapon on you that you can pull out at any time. In general, what are people missing when it comes to street fighting? We've already talked about, okay, you might be training in a sport and therefore you are depriving yourself of certain techniques that you need to for the sport, but you want to still rehearse them at times. So they come into your brain and your neural synapses at a
Mhm.
time of fighting. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about people who are not pressure testing anything. So they might have an extremely amazing neck breaking technique, but they've actually never tried to even begin to put it on anybody, and it's never going to work under pressure. Any other thoughts? And I'm sure you could go on for hours of this, but like, where are people getting it wrong? What do you wish people were doing more for the street? Just curious your take on any of that.
I would mainly the pressure testing, the sparring aspect in a safe manner. Now, of course, some of us, we like to take it to a higher level of intensity sometimes and put on a helmet with a face thing so you can headbutt, but we take it to a high intensity level because intensity matters. And so not everybody has to do that, but at least get in there and play the game so you know what are you good at? What are you not so good at? And
Mhm.
you can strengthen those weaknesses, but especially you can strengthen your strengths. Again, like that lift kick, like you strengthen that to a point where you can kick pretty much anybody with that lift kick. You mentioned in your episode about women's self defense, and I had
Mm.
something to say about that. Is that the idea that, well, if somebody does a women's self defense course, a 2 hour, 3 hour course, it's pretty much useless. It's not going to help them in a situation. Interesting, my wife, Sarah, who is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, also an instructor in JKD and all, she teaches a women's self-defense course, which I might be biased, but I don't think I am in this, that it is the best women's self-defense course I've ever seen. What she does is she shows videos of actual attacks. She has the women do some techniques and then adds resistance, and they leave the seminar going, wow, awareness and avoidance is the answer. It's not like, oh, you should be aware and you should avoid it, but somebody comes up to you and they grab your wrist, you just do this thing and you, it's like, no, her goal is to make them leave feeling more vulnerable than when they came in by just showing them the truth instead of saying, hey, when you leave here, you should be super confident and all, because that's just not true. And so, as you mentioned, that has prompted some of them to go into training
Ah, I get it. It inspires them to then put in the effort they're going to need to actually develop some skills.
if they want to develop skills, or they
Right.
just go, man, I'm going to be super cautious as far as not going into that parking structure alone and such. So she just gives them the truth. I also say, as great as that system is, where you have those attackers with the
Yeah, it's the
all
model
and
mugging kind of thing.
yeah, the model mugging and all, it's really good because you can actually hit and all.
Yeah.
My point is they have the helmet on the wrong person. I think the person being attacked should have the helmet so they really know what an attack feels like. Because those model muggers, once you do a little bit, they kind of go with it because they have so much equipment on, right? I really believe that, and most people would never do it, but if you put the helmet on the defender, then they get to feel what an attack actually feels like. And then they get a dose of reality and like, oh man,
So when you say put the helmet on them, you mean and then let them get hit a little bit?
yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
Let them
Okay, I
actually
got
get
you. I got
attacked.
you. That's a very interesting point of view, Burton. So what we're talking about for people who don't know is there's a style of self-defense class where you have in the class you have the attackers, often a big man, and they're over padded. They've got this massive head thing on that supports their neck. So you can really hit them hard in the head and it's not going to hurt the person. And they've got padding around their thighs. And you can't be totally padded. Like if you're doing a joint lock or something, they're not really defended against that. But for an unskilled person, that person can feel comfortable to hit them as hard as they want. And the attacker person is not going to be hurt. And what those classes are generally about is creating some fear in the defender, which is often women, and getting them to deal with that fear and not shrink away, but strike out, yell, call for help, hit. And I think that's beautiful. That's great. Getting
Beautiful.
them used to that adrenal
Agreed.
fear and like, don't keep it internally, express it. But I do agree that you could convince yourself that, wow, I just knocked that big guy down and kicked him in the groin. Like, you're hitting a big padded thing and they're letting it roll with you. You're right. So they're getting some emotional, I guess, fear toughness, but
Yeah,
they're not
there's
getting physical toughness. They're not actually being helped. Although the attacker will sit on top of their chest. It's a good thing, but what I hear you saying is there could be more added on to that.
I think sometimes the person doing the mugging, they go with it a little too much. They
Yeah.
sit on top of somebody, male or female, and the person on the bottom just kind of bucks and they go flying off instead of like, oh no, you have to trap my arm. You have to do this well and such. Yeah,
Yeah. I think those systems are more trying to just get people to react.
which is
Anything. There's
great.
just do something.
Do
Yeah.
something. Yeah, don't just shrink and all. Actually fight back. Yes.
I got to tell you a quick story. You probably know Bernice J. She's the wife of Professor Wally J. Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu, who passed away some years ago. They used to have Camp Danzanru, which you might be aware of. You probably went there, maybe taught there. I taught there one time. I used to go a lot. And we had a model mugging crew come through. I think it might have been Mike Belzer at the time, or maybe
Yeah.
his Impact team, and another great martial artist, a friend of ours.
Love
And
Mike.
Bernice at that time, I don't know, I was going to say 60, 65 years old, maybe something like that. She was not a young woman. She was a jiu-jitsu black belt from the old days. That's how she met Professor J. But she was like your grandma, right? So sweet, so wonderful. This Hawaiian woman, very gentle, great massage, great healing stuff. And these people came through and did this demonstration. And then they just called for some volunteers from the audience. And they were calling for women and they were going to subject the women to this thing and tell them what to do. So they gave instructions. They said, okay, the guy is going to come at you and you just knee him in the groin. And then you say 911 and then you're done. Right. So Bernice comes
Yes.
out there. She's the quietest person, the softest, gentlest person. This guy comes up to her and shoves her. She beat the shit out of him. She kneeing him in the groin, holding his head down, kneeing him in the head. The guy falls down like they're supposed to because they're trying to react
Yep.
like they would.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, 911. No, she's jumping onto his chest, onto Tate Kyogatami, what we call the mount. She's pounding elbows into his head, pounding. And they're like, you're done. And then they like pull her off. Okay. And then she walks back and they say, you're done. He starts to get up. She breaks free from them, goes back to the guy, starts. It was so funny to me. And I was like, go, Bernice, go,
That's
Bernice.
awesome. Oh, that is so, so great. Yeah, it is great training. I want to make sure everybody understands what I'm saying. That's really great training. I would like to add that they put the helmet on the other person.
Yes,
So,
you would
and
like to
it's,
extend it more. I hear you. I hear you.
but that's such a Hawaii sort of attitude on it. Like she's like flipped the switch from aloha to destroy.
She's amazing. So, Burton, besides the physical skills of how to fight, that's something you're continually working on. By the way, you mentioned that your wife teaches a self-defense thing. If there's anything online on that or anything I can link to, we'll certainly put it in the show notes.
Okay.
Everything we've talked about, every person we've talked about, I'll be sure there's links to them in the show notes so
Oh,
people
great.
can follow up, including you and any training that you're doing if people want to come to you. But you mentioned that you took learnings from your academic career as a scientific researcher and you brought that into the martial arts. Are there other lessons that you've taken from your martial arts experience that you've brought into your life in general, not necessarily about fighting, but that just affect how you interact with people, how you live your life?
Yes. So my definition, maybe somebody else has this too, but my personal definition of martial arts is the art of overcoming obstacles. And so taking that as the base, then when obstacles arise in our everyday life, we have that same mentality of almost a curiosity. How am I going to get around this problem? What am I going to do? Can I just go straight through it? Or is there some sort of way I can circumvent it, etc.? So I think that's the number one thing. In order to do that, we have to have a positive mindset. For example, if somebody is mounted on top of us, sitting on our chest, this is not the time to go, oh, poor me. Why does this always happen to me? No, this is the time to get to work and just try to get out and have that mindset that I will get out. It may take a while. I may take some punishment, but I am going to get out and get to a better position. And so when I was going through a lot of these health issues, which did go over about a 8-year span, which was bad. And there are certain times in there is particularly bad. I had like 3 months, 4 months in 2022, where if I was laying in the bed, if I just moved like that much, I'd be just being terrible pain. It's like
Mhm.
just any movement was just very incredibly painful. And I was happy that because of my martial arts training here in Hawaii, I was able to look out the window and at least find gratitude that I'm here in Hawaii. I'm not like in that trailer I lived in, or
Mhm.
I'm in someplace I didn't want to be. And so I think being able to have the positive mindset and be thankful regardless of the situation we're in, find something to be grateful for. Just, gosh, it just enhances our lives so much. Because in martial arts, we're training not to be a victim. And as soon as we fall into that victim mentality, whatever it is, then we're pretty much doomed. And so I think that resilience from the martial arts, and a lot of that comes from, for example, in jiu-jitsu or in kickboxing, whatever it is, losing, basically losing, having bad positions, and I'm just going, hey, I'm going to get better at this. I'm going to eventually succeed. And I don't want to just survive. I want to prevail. That mindset. It's not about survival. It's about prevailing in a bad situation. I think that can go over every aspect of life. So you can walk down the street with a smile on your face. You're not afraid of people. You can be kind to people. Here in Hawaii, the aloha spirit is very generous and helpful. And we can live like that, knowing in the back of our mind, if something turns, then we can handle
The strength is there, the seriousness is there. I'm so sorry you went through that experience in your life, that medical experience. I've lived, I think, a very healthy life. I'm very grateful for that. But I also went through something a couple of years back that might have been some PTSD, lack of sleep. I had been involved in some animal rescue stuff back in when Katrina happened and just
it.
saw a lot of very disturbing things. It was very stressful and maybe something re-triggered that. It's a long story, but it turned into some sort of essentially an anxiety disorder, which is really weird if you know me, because I'm not an anxious person, but this was a real problem and it spun up and everything seemed dangerous to me. It was very difficult.
Mm.
And I pushed through it. And you're mentioning how the martial arts, that knowledge that like, I'm going to stick through, I'm in a bad situation now, but I'm going to get through it. That is exactly what helped me, is this, the knowledge that the doctors say this is going to get better. This is like really hard now. It's hard for me to even set a foot outside of my house. I couldn't train. It was just so
Wow.
many crazy things going on. But like, I am going to put through this. And I made a commitment, exactly what you said. I remember saying to myself, I am going to not give up. I am going to stick through this, and I am going to turn this into something that is a benefit for me. I am not going to let this win. I am going to win. In the end, I will look back and say, as you did with your early life experience, well, I don't want to go through that again. I don't think that's a good thing that happened, but I'm committed to, I will make this something that made my life better. And,
Awesome.
and in that moment, you also mentioned gratitude. That is exactly the kind of thing I was thinking of at that time, Burton. I was thinking, wow, I've always felt that I'm a person that's filled with gratitude. And I am. I'm just so happy. I'm so grateful. I'm so glad I live in this beautiful place in California and for all the benefits I've had in my life. And I'm very grateful for all that. But I realized in that time, it's easy to be grateful when things are going fine. But can
Right.
you be
But
grateful for your life? Can you find things to be grateful for when things are not going fine? When things are absolutely terrible? And that's exactly the time that you would say, damn it, I don't deserve this. But can you be
you're
grateful at the times when things are hardest? And it sounds like that's what you were doing when you were looking out that window. So that resonates with me a lot.
just what you did. Yeah. And there you go. Martial arts. We both trained so diligently in martial arts. We both came to the same conclusion when under pressure. We could get caught in that. Why is this happening to me? But it doesn't matter. It's happening.
That's
So
right.
let's move forward.
So you have a lot of years in, as much as anybody at this point. I'm wondering if you could talk to a younger version of yourself. What would you say? Anything you wish you could tell yourself?
Just enjoy the process. Often when I talk to people, I just say, enjoy your training. Or if I'm messaging with somebody, I end with, enjoy your training. If we just enjoy it, we do it more often. And I think we get more out of it. I think we absorb more technique and understanding when we have that more joyous point of view. I think that's what I'd say. And I would say, do more testing, pressure testing earlier. I think I would do that. I probably would have competed more. One of the original Dog Brothers, and that was so good for me. I fought in China. I did do jiu-jitsu competition and all.
For our listeners, Dog Brothers, I actually mentioned that in my episode 2. Full contact, real stick fighting. And it's not just stick fighting, punching, kicking, stick fighting, whatever. So you know Mark and Eric from
Yes.
back then.
Yeah, it was one of the
Amazing. Insane stuff. I will link to it, but go ahead. You were Dog Brothers. Yeah.
yeah, and just that's one thing I would change. I would do more competition when I was younger. I
I
think
see.
that's one thing I would change just to get more competition experience. I'm happy with myself that I did go and really push myself to train in a lot of different places that were very uncomfortable. Like you go into South Africa and you're in a Zulu village, and there are two guys in the village that speak English, and they're going to take you over to stick fight with a bunch of the young bucks. And like, well, this should be interesting. But it all worked out well when I was in the Philippines and found a master. And I went out to the slum to train with him. And Dan Inosanto had these stories about 8, I believe, of his instructors, the Filipino martial arts instructors, with stick fighting. The first lesson was, it'd say, hit me here. They would move and just smash him in the hand. So he understood just how bad that hurt. So like how effective that was. It may not seem like it's that big a deal getting hit in the hand, but it hurts much, much more than people would think.
With a stick?
With a stick, they
Oh,
just
yeah.
smashed him in the hand with a stick.
Oh, yeah. Ow.
Yes. And so I'm in the slum in the Philippines with this gentleman I do not know. And he says, hit me here. I'm like, oh gosh. But so I went ahead and swung, and he didn't smash me in the hand, thankfully. But, just actually going and doing it instead
Yeah.
of like, oh, I'd like to go to Brazil and train, but I'm not going to do it. But like those experiences in Brazil were amazing, in South Africa, in the Philippines, all these places in the world that I've been able to train. Japan, I'm very glad I did.
That's great that you did that. And you're absolutely right. It's the kind of thing we read about, and I don't think people appreciate how difficult that is. I do that in jiu-jitsu. I walk onto new mats, but it's jiu-jitsu. I know what to expect at least. But to go to somewhere like you did, where you don't really speak the language and there's a certain risk associated there, and these are dangerous environments like a slum in the Philippines, you could be needing those skills that night. And to be going into a new place, and there's always the potential attitude that someone kind of wants to show you while you're there. Just deep respect for your willingness to put yourself into those different situations, and you stand now the benefit from it for all that you know.
Yes, that's true. I will say, in one of the areas that I went to stick fight in South Africa, I learned a lesson is when you're going to stick fight with 16 to 18-year-olds, don't do it when all the girls are watching.
Oh, that's a
Because
good point.
this is not a good idea. Yeah, because they did try to knock me out.
These are the things you can only learn from experience. You
Yeah.
know, what I do much easier because I'm going into jiu-jitsu schools. I have this thing I call getting people to open up the book of knowledge. And what I mean by that is if I go in there, it's as I'm getting older now, people don't do this as much. Maybe they have respect or they feel bad. They don't want to beat up the old guy. They don't understand I'm still in good shape. But certainly for so many of my years as a BJJ black belt, when I would go onto a mat, people would be like, oh, new black belt, let's get him, or let's get this American guy or whatever. And the obvious thing for me to do would be fight them hard, beat them, right? But what I quickly learned was I can do that if I can beat them. I do that. But what's better is if I put up a really good fight, but just let them beat me once first.
Mm,
Like even
smart.
even if they don't deserve that, just let them, because once they do that, once they actually tap you, and even if I tap them a bunch of times after that, it kind of puts their guard down and it makes people feel like, well, they kind of proved what they wanted to prove and I tapped. And then I get a chance to ask them because everyone's doing something really well. Whether or not it would have made me tap or not, it's a different question. But I can always see, like, wow, that guy's really good at that. And that opens up the door for me to get them to open up the book of knowledge. I can say, how did you do that? If I go in there and beat people up, I can't just say, hey, but I noticed you were really good at that. How did you do that? Like, why would they do that? So I think coming like with, oh, I don't know, with leaving your ego at the door, basically, and coming saying, let's train, but I will intentionally try to not get into that situation that you're describing, the young guys with the women, because I don't want that. I want them to see me as not a threat. And
Yes.
let's just trade some ideas. But kudos to you for doing that, man.
Well, interesting. Dan Inosanto, another so much wisdom passed
Mhm.
along. He would tell me when you go to train with somebody else and whatever the martial art is, he said, learn, but don't learn too fast. Because sometimes if you learn too fast,
They'll stop teaching.
yeah, exactly. Because you're
Right.
like, oh yeah, oh I know this one, right? And it's like, okay, they're not going to teach you anything. So yeah, I love that how you say open up the book of knowledge. Bruce Lee was his method when he wanted to learn a certain system or whatever. He did not go to the top guy. He went to the number two or number three guy because they were more eager to show that they knew what they were doing. And so that,
Interesting.
yeah, beautiful tactics, right? So that's how he got knowledge.
Very interesting. You mentioned that I might, as I'm older or even now, discover that some of the stuff I did from those kung fu years are good and I might want to do it now. Is there anything like that from your past that you find at your age, whatever physical challenges you're dealing with now, something that you've brought forward that you think is healthful for you that you practice now?
I do a lot more of just swinging the sticks, like double sticks, just for movement. Keep my body supple and moving. I do that. The dance I do as well. But I would say there were years and years and years where I wouldn't just pick up two sticks and start swinging them. As a matter of fact, I'd be teaching in Italy. There's a place, I have a great student named Augusto Baracco in Italy, and I go out there almost every single year to teach seminars. And at the end of the seminar, every time there would be somebody that said, could you move the double sticks, please? Like just move it in the air. Like, oh, okay, I haven't done this since last year at this seminar. So I'd pick them up and I'd move them around. But now I do it very often, almost every day, because it just makes me feel good. It gets the blood flowing and it's just so good for the body and just everything.
What you're talking about is holding maybe a 2 foot long stick in each hand
Yes.
and making motions, making circling motions. And I could totally see how that would be good for your joints, good for your movement. I feel like that would be actually very beneficial for me. One of the consequences of my long term training in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is elbows not fully extending, not fully bending, shoulder issues. And I could just, even as you're describing it, and I never have really trained in Kali or Eskrima, so I don't really know. I can twirl a stick, I suppose, but I could really use to learn the motions. And if it has some fighting application, even better, but that wouldn't be why I'm doing it. It's a more a
Yes.
mobility exercise, it sounds like.
Yeah. Mobility exercise that some of it translates to fighting directly, but it's just good for your body and your mind and it feels good. It's just satisfying to do it.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. You're in paradise. I wondering if you have any last thoughts that you want to share and what's going on with you now? Are you still teaching? Any thoughts about your future? Any goals that you have that you still want to check off?
I just want to continue to train and improve and then pass that along insights to other people. I do have over 4 decades of training. Sometimes I go into a particular methodology, and sometimes it's more a broad thing like stick fighting, or it can be a particular style of weaponry. For example, there's a man named Antonio Illustrissimo who actually was a sword fighter, like for real swords. He fought in World War II in the Philippines and actually did, are you ready for this? Prize fights, sword against sword. And yeah, this is a whole nother level.
Wow.
I'll tell you, he cut the guy's thumb off like one of the people. Anyway, yeah, this is a whole nother level of confidence and all. So for example, I trained with him and I trained deeply with that, and I have programs on that. So I just want to continue making material available that might not be available, especially from the point of view of, hey, this better work. We should be able to test this ourselves so you yourself can find out whether or not that works. That's one thing. The other thing is, I just encourage everybody to think long term in their training. Again, back to your beautiful episode on ego. If you think tonight, training in jiu-jitsu, I cannot tap, I have to tap my opponent, you're going to stick to your very narrow game, which may end up doing you harm in the long term. So open it up, experiment, find great partners to train with, and gosh, enjoy this process. We are so, how really, David, how fortunate are we? How blessed are we to be able to do this every day? It's unbelievable in the history of mankind that we can do our passions like daily. It's just, there's
Right.
so much to be
No,
grateful for.
absolutely. Also, there's the Carole King song Anticipation, which has the phrase, "These are the good old days." I
Yes.
really believe that, especially as you're getting older. Things are going to start to hurt. We're not going to be able to train forever. Sadly, we're probably going to encounter other medical issues at some point that are going to take up our time. As they say, getting old isn't for the weak of heart or whatever. But the point is, wherever you are in your life right now, it's so easy to just get wrapped up in our daily stuff and do our things and do whatever we're doing and forget to sit back, like what you're saying, and take a moment of appreciation. Like, these are the good old days. These are the days that at some point in the future we're going to look back on and say, wow, did I have it good? And I think it's very good to be conscious of that if indeed these are the good old days.
Such a good point. I'll add along with that, for example, my good friend for a long time, Marcelo Garcia, I got him to move. He says I'm the one that convinced him finally to actually move to Hawaii. So he has an academy near here. Even though I'm sometimes hurting, I go and get as much training in as I possibly can at the academy, because maybe in 15 years, I don't know when, maybe there's a time where I just can barely train often. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm trying to
Yeah.
prioritize that and do as much as I can while I can.
Well, you brought the mountain to Muhammad. If you got
Man,
Marcelo Garcia, one of the best jiu-jitsu people in the world, and you've got him on your little island, if
it's
I were you,
crazy.
I would be getting as much time with him as I possibly could too.
Exactly. Right. And so I just encourage everybody out there, wherever you are, go to training, go get your training done. I don't think anybody will regret spending extra time training. You may regret not training enough.
Well, Burton, this has been a great pleasure. You're amazing. I love your point of view. Obviously, we see eye to eye on a lot of things. I promise you, I will come visit, hopefully sooner than later in Hawaii. Would love to get on the mat. I would love to experience some of your training methods. Just have a lot of appreciation for you, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you do for Jiu Jitsu. You're a great role model. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Burton Richardson. There are links to everything and everyone we mentioned in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and comment and let me know your thoughts. And wherever you're listening, a review would be really helpful. I also need to add a sad note. I told a story to Burton about Bernice J, and I just learned that just before we recorded this conversation, Bernice passed away peacefully in her bed. She had just turned 103 years old, and I had called her to wish her a happy birthday, and she sounded like her old self. I'll add links in the show notes about her as well. And the martial arts community mourns the loss of someone who, to so many of us, was a second mother, and we send our love to her family. I'll be back next week with more lessons from the lab, and until then, keep developing your strength, your wisdom, and go out and do good in the world.